Hello, hello, welcome. Everybody, get yourself a pencil and paper. If you have your own notebook, excellent. There's paper on every table. It's going to be very, very interactive. So I'm really thrilled that you're all here. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to go around and have everybody do introductions, but I'd like to do that a little bit later if we have time. So if you end up that this isn't for you, feel free to leave, use your feet, roll. But if it is, I definitely want to get to know you better, and we can do that when we're sharing some of the results from the exercises. There's going to be 4 sets of exercises today, very short, but I've also created some resources for you. There's a URL you can go to, gamethinking.io/sticky, and that has the resources. You don't need these resources today. You can get them afterwards. If you have a laptop, you can go get them now, and you can get yourself a digital playbook that you can fill out. But if you just have a phone, just use pencil and paper. And we're going to talk today about what hit product teams do differently than most other product teams. And I want you to wear the hat of a product owner, of an entrepreneur, of the person who's responsible not just for building faster and better, but for building the right product. Everything you're going to hear about today is completely focused on building the right product. And it's not helpful to build something faster and better if it's the wrong feature set or the wrong product. Welcome, come on in. So a little about me so you understand where this is coming from. I have an eclectic background in all these things, which is common in the game industry. Oh, wait a minute. What happened there? Ah, I see. There we go. So I've been lucky enough to work on huge unlikely hits, including Rock Band and The Sims and Covet Fashion. Who's heard of any of those games? Okay. As well as other products that aren't games. Long ago, I started at Sun Microsystems. That was my first job out of school, and I did client-server engineering. So my background is science and engineering. I have a PhD in behavioral neuroscience. But then I went to work for Paramount and Viacom, learning the media business and working with brands like MTV and Nickelodeon, E.T., Star Trek, huge brands, bringing them onto the internet. And one day, I was called into the boardroom of our fancy offices and told they were moving the company media headquarters for their innovation lab where I worked to New York from California. So I decided to launch my own company instead of moving. And I started designing social games and online communities. And now I coach other people that build those. But I worked on a number of projects. Anyone ever heard of Ultima Online? Okay, so I worked on that early on, helping fix a lot of the systems. eBay, anyone ever heard of eBay? Worked on eBay, again, helping fix and develop their core social systems, including the reputation system. The Sims, has anyone heard of The Sims or played The Sims? Seems like not everybody, and it's one of the biggest hits of all time. Netflix, worked with Netflix, helped them fix a really nasty retention issue. Happify, digital mental health. Covet Fashion, a huge hit, mobile fashion game that turned into a franchise. Tonal, an intelligent home gym, like Peloton for weightlifting. Replica.ai, a mental health chatbot that's recently been in the news, not in a good way, but they made a chatbot worth talking about. And I also did my own VC-backed brain game startup and had a winding journey as an entrepreneur. So I really understand the challenges of that. And I wrote these books along the way. So that's my background. And I was lucky enough to work with several 6 or 7 huge, massive hits, and a lot of projects that weren't huge, massive hits, okay? And I want to tell you about Rock Band, which is a multiplayer music game that was a huge hit and franchise, because it really illustrates a lot of what I want to teach you today. So I used to live in Half Moon Bay, California, in the Bay Area, and I was having lunch in my living room overlooking the bay with this brilliant entrepreneur who founded a company called Harmonix. He had come out of MIT, and they did multiplayer music games. They had done Guitar Hero, and he had an idea for another one where you could be in a whole band, but if you're an engineer, you might appreciate how hard it is to do real-time multiplayer music game remotely with other people. It was very, very challenging. And this crazy idea, which I worked on from the beginning, turned into a very unlikely, massive hit. There was Rock Band 4, you know, in the gaming industry, like the movie industry, and throughout entertainment, sequels are a big deal. And it had multiple sequels. It was a cultural sensation. It was featured on Glee. And there was even real skill-building effects. The game was studied in the lab, and people that played a lot of Rock Band had better musical perception. So way back when we were first working on it and bringing it to life, we were having a lot of trouble with the drums. Anybody here a musician? Any musicians here? So the drums were really, really hard to tune and integrate in this game. And we didn't have enough built that we could really test it on our target audience. So we brought in enthusiastic superfans who had played our previous games, but they weren't who we were targeting the game at. Let me say that again. The people who helped us bring the game to life were not the same people as who we were targeting to sell the game to. I was very confused. I kept fighting with my boss saying, why are we doing this? Why aren't we testing it on the right people? And he said, you know, calm down, little Padawan, just, you'll see how it goes. Game turned into a huge hit. And I went from frustration to, oh, maybe there's something here. Maybe there's actually wisdom in what's going on here. So I noticed same pattern on the other hits I worked on. And I figured out that your beachhead is not your destination in games, as in war, and in products. So if you want to think like a product owner and figure out the right thing to build, you have to know who to build it for and who to test it on. And you have to start by delighting your beachhead niche, a small, narrow segment of high-need customers, before solving for a larger audience. This is one of the things, if you remember one thing from today, this is one of those counterintuitive truths that will change how you develop product, and it will at least 10x your ability to innovate. Why is this? Okay? Well, it's because of innovation diffusion theory. In 1961, a Bell Labs scientist studied innovation and saw that innovation spreads through early adopters and the people who consider themselves innovators before other parts of the majority. And then Jeffrey Moore wrote a book called Crossing the Chasm, a marketing classic. 30 years later, same model, same data-driven model. Anybody here like data-driven models? I do too. Data-driven model. Same model, introduced the chasm because it's very hard to go from your early passionate audience to your early majority. It's quite difficult. But when you do, you get hits. Every hit I worked on, every single one, did this. That's why I'm telling you about it. And the more you're innovating, the more relevant this is. Start here, not here. There's a myth, the TAM myth. And when you're pitching a VC or you're pitching internally to get your project greenlit, you talk about your total addressable market. That's part of being a product owner and an entrepreneur. But that's what you pitch to get support and funding. If you try and start there, you fail. Successful startups move from beachhead to TAM. There's occasionally an example of this not happening, but it's an exception. Brian Chesky says, build something 100 people love, not something a million people kind of like. And that's really the idea. Some people say niche down to get big. Same idea. So ask yourself, what is a highly specific group of people that has a burning need for this product? They are looking for it. They will use something else if your product doesn't exist or if your game doesn't exist. Okay, exercise time. Everybody get their paper or their laptop out. And I want you to think about what you're working on now. And if it doesn't apply, think about a dream project you'd like to work on, okay? But I really want you to apply this to your work. And I want you to practice thinking small and thinking big. What is the most niche down? Where are there like 10 or 20 people that you could describe in a certain way that would be actively looking for something like yours? If you have a mature product, talk about your absolute most high need, passionate customers. But if you're developing something, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're starting to develop a new product, if you're trying to launch an adjacent product to something you already have, all those situations. If you're trying to fix retention, think really niche. And then think big. What's the bigger market? How would you describe it? Your TAM. So I'd like you to take 3 to 5 minutes right now and write those two things down, okay? If anyone has a question, you can come up and ask me.
Should we think small and then think big?
Either way. Either way, because what I want you to do is write both down so that you can see the difference. So approach it whichever way is most natural for you. Let me show you a couple of examples. Here's Rock Band. So the big is every frat house, party home, and tech startup where people gather. We targeted for Rock Band. That's how we talked about it. And that's how it was used. Small was existing rhythm action gamers who already loved Guitar Hero and wanted to help us beta test a new harmonics game. That was the narrowness. The Sims, similar thing was going on. The big was everyone who ever played with a dollhouse as a kid and imagined it coming to life. That's what The Sims could be. My daughter plays it now, many years after I worked on it. The small is, when we started testing it, there was like 100 simulation gamers who had already played SimCity and were in touch with the developer, Will Wright, and were helping us like test early tools. It wasn't even the game, it was like the tools that were going to build the game. So that's who our very first target audience was, completely different than the big one. Why was that our target audience? Opportunistic. They could help us. Sometimes your target audience is very opportunistic. Just like in war, there isn't only one right beachhead. It's the beachhead that gets you going. Make sense? Okay, now I want you to think about it. Here, I'll put it back up. Okay. Now I should have had some music to play. All right, has anybody filled it out? If you filled it out, raise your hand. Okay, you guys can keep working, but I'd like a couple people real quick to share. So tell me what you wrote.
Basically, my product is like a digital marketing.
Do we have a mic for her? Keep talking, but he'll bring you a mic. So digital marketing.
It's the product is that we want to have as an organization, we want to provide a digital marketing service to the customers.
Okay.
So if I think big, the dream would be like every startup, every small scale organization or a medium scale organization, basically they are our customers and they are using our service for digital marketing. And if I think small and I just want to begin with it, what we can think of is like having a small group of 3 to 4 startups using it, seeing how it works, and then we learning from it. And
What kind of startups? Let's get more specific.
the organizations which are just 2 or 3 years old.
What do they do? There's lots of kinds of startups.
So they can be into manufacturing, they can be into construction.
Okay, manufacturing and construction. But do you see how it got narrower and narrower?
Yes, yes.
Excellent. So can you pass it to the other lady? So that's really good. But again, get as narrow as you can.
Hi.
Okay.
So I'm currently working on this doc portal where we actually have a list of all the products that our company offers. And so it has other areas as well where one application can integrate with other application. So this particular portal gives me information about all of that and also about the API coding and all that. So the two set of groups that I have addressed here is, one is a very small set where the developers come to this portal to just get the API code of the product. So the other set, the huger set is all people who want to know more and more about the products and the application solution that we develop in our application, in our organization. So this is this larger set of group of people who actually want to know and understand more about the product.
Okay. What developers? Which developers? Let's talk about the small set. What developers?
Any kind of developers. So they're
That's too broad. Get more specific.
front end, back end. So there are a lot of, yeah.
Working on what? I mean, again, the more broad you are, the harder it is to do everything. So can you get any more specific?
No, because this portal gives me information about variety of products, and each product work on different, they work on different application area, platform, and all of that. So each of these developers might be looking into different products and different product areas. So it's hard to tell what kind of developers they are.
Okay, so your small to big is from developers to more people
Yes,
in
yes.
your
Non-developers and non-techie people. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so we're going to keep going, but I want all of you to keep doing this work, and there'll be more opportunities to share as we keep going. And you can also, please continue to do this at home, because this isn't school. This is for you and your career growth. All right, so there's this concept called finding the fun in games, and it applies far beyond games. But it's an important part of every hit. So Sid Meier did a game called Civilization. Any Civilization players here? Yeah. Wonderful game. And this is a quote from him. Our approach to making games is we find the fun first, and then we use the tech to enhance the fun. What does that mean? It means you don't start with features and, oh, this would be cool, and how about this mechanic? You start with the experience that you want to deliver. Now, remember I told you the drums are really hard to tune? So that's part of what finding the fun was. Every game, every product that's successful, every product I mentioned I worked on, every product you use that you use over and over again has a core habit loop, whether you know it or not. Rock Band's core habit loop, it's the small thing, it's the activity you do over and over and over again. In Rock Band, it's play a song. You can go on a tour, you can have a set list, there's all kinds of things, but the atomic unit is play a song with your friends. So just to get 4 people, including the drums, so drums, guitar, bass, vocals, just to get 4 people working, at least 6 months of crude graphics and tuning. It was really hard work. Not every game or product takes that much, but that's what it took on Rock Band. And then we started introducing the layers of feedback and the graphics and all of that turned it into a hit. Now, another truth is that in every product that you use over and over again, there's that loop, that habit loop. We call it a learning loop. It's shorthand for skill building habit loop. That lives inside of a journey. It's not the same the first day you use it as on day 30 or day 60 or day 90. So the journey, a way to think of it is starts with discovery, where you find out what it is, and it's the messaging. Is this for me? Should I bother? For Rock Band, the way that happened was mostly word of mouth. People saw other people playing it, and they wanted to try it too. Then there's onboarding, where you learn the ropes. When someone joins the system, they want to know how to get value as quickly as possible. So we had tutorials in Rock Band, which, by the way, were done right at the end. And we polished onboarding during public beta, not at the beginning. Very common mistake people make. They polish onboarding too early. Then there's habit building, not the same as onboarding. Think of it as day 30, day 21. What's going on? What's a session look like? What pulls your customer back? Usually there's something new, or there's something they need to complete. So in Rock Band, let's play a song. I mean, it was really just, it's Saturday night, friends are over, what shall we do? But what we did there on Rock Band and on The Sims, and it was part of what I did with Netflix to help them solve their retention problem, is focused on that core habit loop and got that right before getting the rest of it. And I want you to remember that. If you want to drive, how many people here care about retention in their product? Okay. If you want to drive retention, really understanding the habit loop that you're delivering and creating for your customer is incredibly helpful. And it's not, don't think of it as an operant conditioning, oh, I'm going to throw rewards at them. That's a good way to get everything to backfire. But if you can really think about making sure your ideas, first of all, have a habit loop, and then making sure that that's a good experience that gets better over time and doesn't stay flat and boring, then you're on a good track. And that's what we did in Rock Band. And then after habit building, there's mastery, which means it's not really a destination, it's more like a vector, mastery. But it's, okay, people that invest in learning the ropes, in mastering your systems, what do you have for them? Is there anything special? Often people want impact more than they want trinkets or rewards or freedom. So in Rock Band, one of the things we added later in some of the sequels was the idea that you could go on tour as a mastery path. You could play songs, you could come up with a set list, you could level up and play bigger. You went from garage to stadium, and that's how you got better, because you were playing bigger stages. But then you could go on tour, and that was cool, because it made sense in the metaphor. So what is it that makes a habit loop sticky? Because you'll hear a lot about habit loops. There's a lot of different approaches, and I'll be talking about this more tomorrow in my keynote. But what really makes it sticky? Habit loop is the thing that a loop is something that happens over and over again. So there's different kinds of loops. A habit loop is a loop that's a habit. So a habit loop, let me give you an example. Checking your WhatsApp messages. Any social media. I'm about to talk about it, but a habit loop is, you'll also see the term habit loop a lot in the habit literature if you read. I'll be talking about that in a minute, so I'll just get to that. But let's talk about what makes someone stick. What makes a habit sticky, right? Because you can build a habit, but then habits drop off. How many people have ever started something at New Year's for a week or two and then it dropped? Me, right? Yeah. Habits don't necessarily stick. It's actually one of the hardest things to get them to stick. So one of the smartest things you can do is not try and build a new habit, stack on top of an existing one. It seems kind of obvious, but it's actually one of the most underused design techniques out there, and I want you to be able to use it. So a habit doesn't have to be daily. It can be yearly, weekly. There's different rhythms of habits. Brushing your teeth is a habit. Flossing is habit stacking. Walking the dog is a habit. Anybody here have a dog? Walking the dog is a habit. You could listen to podcasts, right? That would be habit stacking. I don't have time to listen to podcasts. Oh, when I'm walking the dog. Commuting to work, Duolingo. A lot of people use Duolingo when they're commuting to work or apps like that. Sitting down to work in the morning with your coffee, Slack, or a tool like that. You log in to see what's going on. Habit stacking. It's Friday night. What are we going to do after work? Rock band. It really fit in there. So I want you to ask yourself, for what I work on, what is an existing habit that my customers already have? And if you don't know, make a hypothesis. Make a concrete hypothesis you could test, okay? What existing habit could they stack on? Could I stack on? Maybe you know an existing habit, and that would be great. So I want you to, for whatever you're working on today, think about that. And think about what it might be. What are they already doing that your product, what you offer, makes better in some way? So let's show you some examples. So for Rock Band, it's a weekend night, want to have some friends over, what are we going to do? Or we want to have happy hour after work, what are we going to do? For The Sims, a lot of how people played was, I just got off a long, stressful day at work. I want to escape into a fantasy world where I have control. The Sims. And many other games fill that role. So those are some examples. And how do I know this? Because I did a bunch of research on it. And I talked to a lot of people. There's other ways people use The Sims. A lot of people game when they get off work or school. So, okay, I want you to take like 3 minutes, and I want you to think about a habit, okay? And then we'll take just 1 or 2 volunteers. But think about it, and if you know one already, write it down. I don't. Where is my... Oh, there we go. I'm going to give you guys a little music. What? Doesn't have it. I was just putting it in my... You guys hear that? All right. Any volunteers? Anybody got a habit? Do you need a few more minutes? Did you guys give up? Talk to me. I think we have one back there. can we take it back to him? Did you guys find that difficult? No? Yes? No? Yes. It was difficult? In a good way? Not in a good way.
All right. Hello, audible? Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So my existing habit is investing on my L&D with respect to my work. So the byproduct, or what you call the habit loop.
Wait, move it a little further from your mouth. It's a little
Yeah.
loud.
Hello.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
That's good.
So the habit loop or the byproduct I would be interested is networking.
Is what?
Networking.
I don't understand.
Networking with the
Oh,
co-learners.
networking.
Yes.
So what's the existing habit it stacks on?
The existing habit is the L&D, learning and development.
Who's the customer?
Self. I'm the customer.
So you're the customer.
I am the customer. I am learning for my own growth.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're the customer and the habit is networking.
No. The habit loop is networking because I'm basically the byproduct of that is I'm meeting new people through which I am growing my network.
But what's your existing habit that you already do?
Maybe learning. Maybe something like let's say increasing my.
Put it into a context. What time of the day are you doing this activity?
Typically
Where
weekends.
are you?
Weekends.
What devices are you using?
Weekends probably the I would say digital say any digital media could be the say tools which I'm trying to use. Let's say I'm trying to learn Confluence, so that could be my thing. So I could have say 10 other people with me who will be learning. So the byproduct, the habit loop is I'm making a networking with the 9 other people to understand, so that we are working towards learning the same similar tool.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Thank
We
you.
have one more over here.
Yeah, maybe I would use a very simple example. Like, I wanted to get into a habit of, let's say, doing 10,000 steps every day. And stretching a time out just for doing that was difficult. So I already had existing habit of drinking water regularly. So what I started doing, instead of bigger bottle, I'll keep smaller bottle. And when I'm in office, rather than fetching water from the nearby cooler, I'll make sure I go on the other floor, get up or get down, or on the extreme opposite side. And that's how maybe I'll build 1,000 steps. So it's not like 10,000 steps at a stretch, but 1,000 steps at a time. And then that got me into this habit loop of making sure that for anything and everything, I would rather take stairs, things like that. Very, very small experiments rather than, but then it became kind of part and parcel of life.
Great, thank you. That's a great example. So you can think about this in your own life, about habit stacking. We have one more back there. So you can think about this in your own life, and if it's a stretch, just tuck it away. Maybe it'll make sense to you later in your career. But for those of you who relate to this, understanding how you can habit stack your product for your customer will majorly shortcut your retention issues.
Actually, I have a question on that. So, so I have written down 2 products basically, right? So one is which probably sometime I may or may not get a chance to do, which is like an app.
So we have to keep this really short.
Sure.
Okay, so can you ask
I'll
your
not
question?
talk about that. I'll not talk about that
Yes.
because that's fairly easy, I think,
Yeah.
from the examples you gave. What I want to ask is that, say, so my product right now is a backend system, right? I'm what do you say, transforming my technically the backend, say, security platform of a bank, for example, right? So if I have to apply this over there, right? So there essentially my customers are nothing but other applications, right? The mobile app, the web app, etc., which will be using my platform, right? So how do I extrapolate it there? Because they are not real customers as such, right?
No,
So,
I think maybe it doesn't really apply.
here,
It's really
okay.
for products that have a person using them.
Got it.
But at some point, someone's going to use this. But I think it doesn't
It may not
apply
apply
as
there.
much
Okay.
now. And if
Understood.
anything doesn't apply, skip it.
Sure.
Yes.
So you mentioned about to find the habit of your customer, you would apply some methodology, or you do some research, right? Can you
Right.
just brief about that as well?
I think
Because I'm
not
struggling
right
with that.
now, and the reason is we're very short on time, but I would be
Okay.
happy to do it in the future. I have a lot of videos on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
If you don't know about our YouTube channel, it's called Game Thinking TV. You can find it on gamethinking.io, our website. And I have a lot of videos that talk about that. But yes, you're right. And what we specialize in is making that research go really fast in our training programs. But there's a lot of free material
Yeah.
on our YouTube TV for this reason.
Yeah. So to connect with the exercise 1, what you would like to do is check for those minimal customers who definitely need your product, and then understand what habits they have, or
Understand
routines.
the day in their life. Understand
Okay.
the struggling moments where they're trying to solve the problem that you're going to help them solve better.
then
Understand who they're already using, who your competitors are in their eyes.
Okay.
And also what habits they have. The habit might be using a competitor. Like, but it's like if they are, whatever it is they're doing, where are they? What time of day? Who are they interacting with? All the context around the times in their life when they would actually be using your product because it solves a problem of yours. Those habits.
Yeah.
And to
so
do
you
that,
stack
you need
on.
yeah, and then if you understand that, you stack on the habit. And it can go much deeper if you understand like the competitive landscape from their point of view. But that's kind of level 2.
Great. Thank
Does
you.
that make sense?
Yep.
Good. Okay. So great. So this is again to get you started thinking about this. Okay, let's zoom in on habit building. So what is a sticky habit loop? You guys I keep using this term. Well, let's take it apart. So this is a really good model. There's triggers, an activity, skill building feedback, not external rewards, but skill building feedback. That's the difference with an operant conditioning loop. And then progress and investment. So there's a situational trigger. What is that? It's like, what reminds someone to use your app, your product, your backend, your whatever? What is the reminder? What's the trigger? Well, again, weekend night, let's do something with friends. That's for Rock Band. What's the activity? What does your app deliver? What is it that people are doing over and over again? In Slack, it's reading and responding to messages. In Rock Band, it's playing a song with your friends. You select the song, that's part of the fun. And then there's empowering feedback. Rock Band as a game is full of feedback that actually makes you get better at the game. It's very, very good at that, as are many games. But you don't have to be a game to use skill building feedback. What is your customer trying to do and how can you help them get better at it? The feedback does that, that's all you need. And I'm going to give an example of that tomorrow in my keynote to bring that more to life. Meaningful progress. Well, in Rock Band, it was better gear and playing bigger venues, which reinforced the metaphor, right? But progress and investment, there can be all kinds of ways that's expressed. It doesn't have to be visual. It can just be that you get more features or, more power or more something. So if you can work on the thing people are going to do over and over again and making sure that that rocks, to coin a phrase, before polishing your onboarding, you will dramatically increase your odds of success. Why? Why is this powerful? Well, I just introduced this model, discovery through mastery. I call it the mastery path. And we're developers, right? We work with developers. So as developers, you have to build something first, right? It's not going to be the whole product. It's some sort of MVP, whatever you call it. Well, what do you focus on in your MVP? A lot of people build onboarding. But what would happen if you really focused on that loop, that day 21, that thing people are going to spend most of their time doing? This is what Sid Meier does when he brings a game to life. And then you have just enough onboarding at that point. When you head toward beta, then you develop your onboarding more while you continue refining the loop. When you get toward launch, that's when you ramp up discovery, right? When it's important to get the messaging and the outreach and your channels and all that. And then expansion is really where you get into more of the mastery systems. One of the most common mistakes people that gamify stuff do is they get all excited about the mastery systems. hit game designers, they do that stuff last. They work on this other stuff first. So this is how I've seen products that turn into hits get developed. So ask yourself, is there some repeatable activity, ideally one you can make pleasurable, satisfying? Pleasurable doesn't have to mean fun. It can just be satisfying. Sometimes a really good confirmation screen goes a long way. Know what I mean? So think about that. Think about the thing people do the most and how you can optimize that. And if you deliver skill-building feedback as part of that loop, that's how you're going to get a sticky habit loop. People like getting better at things they care about. Simple. So I want you now to think just for a moment, because we are short on time. I want you to take 1 minute and just jot down, what's that core activity? If you're working on any product, what is the thing that people do over and over again, the most important core activity in your product? Just jot it down. Okay? While you're doing that, so in Rock Band, as I mentioned, it's play a song together. In The Sims, it's really checking in on how your simulation is progressing, which turns out to be surprisingly fun. So I'm going to keep going, and I'll take some questions when we get done on that. But I want to tell you a story about a startup, an AI startup. How timely. So there was a brilliant team of Russian computer scientists. They had a hot idea for a chatbot, an AI friend you could talk to anytime that really could make you feel better. They raised a lot of money. They had a big launch and shit retention. And they really struggled. They tried so many things. And the reason is that driving sustained retention is super hard. It's one of the hardest things out there. You think, oh, I could track and reward behavior. That should do it, right? But then it turns out that doesn't always work. Maybe some of you have found that out. I sure have. So this team, Replica, they tried it. To drive engagement, they added points and badges. Did a 6-week sprint, had a crack team, shipped it. And initially, their stats went up. But it didn't help them with long-term retention. In fact, monthly actives went down. And even worse, they couldn't figure out who they were really serving from these activities. So that's when we started working with them using these techniques I've been teaching you today. First thing we did was zero in on a super narrow group. Who is this actually for? And the hard thing about that is in order to say who it's for, you also have to say who it's not for. And it's really hard. No one wants to shut a door on a customer. But you have to succeed. So figured it out, designed a journey instead of just a sandbox playground, designed a progressive journey based on what those people wanted, and turned around retention such that they're very successful today. Controversial, but successful. So how do we find those superfans? You asked me that earlier. Well, we needed to decide who to target. First thing was make some hypotheses we could test. Hardcore AI enthusiasts were one pocket, and there was a lot of them, and they wanted certain features. There were some people that were diagnosed with mental illnesses. That was another cohort. They wanted other features. And then there were struggling, lonely young adults who weren't diagnosed with a specific thing, but they were just struggling, and that was who we ended up focusing on for all kinds of reasons, including liability issues you get into with people with diagnoses. So how do we find them? Well, there's 4 traits they need to have, and I want you to remember this. By the way, you all will get a copy of the slides. First one, your superfans have the problem. They really have it. They have the problem you solve. For Replica, it's 1 a.m., I'm anxious, who can I talk to? Well, there's this chatbot. They know they have the problem. It's top of mind. You don't have to convince them. So people that were saying, oh, God, I need to sleep better. Maybe I'll go look in the App Store for an app. That's someone who knows they have a problem. 3, they're actively trying to solve the problem. Behavior trumps attitudes when it comes to user research of any kind. You want people to identify themselves through behavior. So are they trying to solve the problem? What does that look like? Searching in the App Store, trying competitors, things like that. Here's one. One person we researched, they were trying all these different AI-based mental health chatbot apps. There's a bunch of them, it turns out, and they were saying, oh, maybe this one will work. Okay, well, that's someone who's actively looking for a solution. 4, they're frustrated with current solutions, and they can tell you why. These people, you find someone with these 4 qualities, these people are gold to talk to. Here's one. I had high hopes for that last CBT chatbot, but it didn't really help me with my insomnia. They're frustrated with current solutions. These are the things you'll hear from people that identify them as superfans. So I want you to just think about, this is a take-home question, talk to your team. What behavioral signals identify people as our superfans, as the people that we most care about in our target audience? That is a really great question to ask. That cuts through a lot of the crap. So you have that as an exercise in your playbook. And rather than stopping now, I want to get done so I can take your questions. But here's some examples for Replica. What were the behavioral signals for this AI chatbot that we used to identify our superfans? 1, this person is struggling with their mental health. 2, this person is searching for something to help with that struggle. 3, this person has tried other solutions. And we ran screeners and then interviewed people to find people that fit that criteria. So one last thing, I'm not focusing on this right now, but a lot of times people say, okay, I understand about the core loop, but what about the journey? What does that mean? It's not a sales journey. This is what happens after your sell, right? This is about retention. So how do you develop and test it? Well, in games, we use a whole bunch of spreadsheets to tune all the systems, and then a lot of low fidelity prototypes. The best studios go low fidelity, like Pixar does. So with Rock Band, we use really low fidelity graphics all up until beta, and we were actually testing different styles. We tested our art concepts in low fidelity first. We didn't do the full-on high concept. We did that sketch stuff to find what our target audience really liked. We tested our UX with really low fidelity, and we refined it that way. And everything about testing the progression. So if you're struggling with trying to figure out how to design the right features in your product, think about using low fidelity mockups and testing it on superfans. If you can manage to do that, you will probably get done in 2 months what would take you a year. It's phenomenally useful. Anybody heard of stage gate theory? No? Well, I'll teach you right now. This is a really well-established theory of corporate innovation, and this is how it goes. Don't fall in love with one idea. Have a bunch of small ideas you test, and then they go through kill gates where they get more resources because they've won the resources. Go through more kill gates again, and then finally you ship a product. This is a well-established theory. It's also how every hit game studio I've ever seen, including Supercell, there was just an article about how Supercell, anybody heard of Supercell? Yeah, okay. It's one of the most successful game studios. They're out of Sweden, I think, or Finland. This is how they do game development. They don't just go, oh, here's a game idea, we're going to put all our resources. There's lots of small experiments. And part of what that does is it keeps you as product owners. I asked you to wear the product owner hat. It keeps you from being too beholden to any one idea, and it lets the ideas win resources by testing and making sure they're the right ideas. And this is how you increase your chances of success. And this is a good quote that sums it up. So don't fall in love with your ideas. Real quick recap. Study the habits and needs of your high-need superfans. Find your high-need, most valuable early customers. Understand their day in the life. It will save you a lot of time and help you drive retention. Build a sticky loop. Build an experience, the thing people do over and over again that they can get better at. Try using low fidelity mock-ups and different kinds of artifacts to test ideas, to save time, and to also keep you focused on the right things. A lot of times people use high fidelity mock-ups. How many people use high fidelity mock-ups for testing? Anybody? What do you not test? What do you test with? Well, okay, when you use high fidelity mock-ups, you get a lot of feedback on the colors and the naming of the buttons and everything about the UX. But a lot of times you don't get feedback on whether it's the right features. So that's one of the tricks to getting that feedback, is to use lower fidelity mock-ups. And this is why we're here, and this is why you're here, and thank you for your time listening. It's because we don't want to make all those changes when we're on the construction site. We want to make that on the drafting table. And these techniques will help you do that. So thank you very much. If, by the way, you would like more resources, we have a free quiz, gamethinking.io/quiz. And you can get MVP Canvas that helps you think these things through. If you want to talk to me, fill out our contact form. And all the resources are at that URL. The playbook for you to fill out and work with your team, and also the slides from the presentation today. So thank you very much for your time. And how are we on timing? Oh, we have 10 minutes. I think we have 10 minutes. Is that right? 40 minutes. Oh, we have 40 minutes? I thought we only had a few minutes left. Oh, I thought we had gone through 60 minutes when you held up the 60. Oh, we had 60 minutes left. Well, guess what? We have a really good Q&A then. So I bet some of you, and in fact, I can answer your question about all that stuff. So let's, does anyone have a question about what I just talked about, first of all? Any questions? Yes. Here, he'll distribute. And by the way, if we break a little early, who's sad? Anybody sad? No, we're not sad.
I would say no one will be angry if you let out of the meeting first.
Right. Who doesn't love found time, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Amy, for your very entertaining presentation. I have two questions, but I'll ask one. You mentioned about the super fans that they already have the problem.
Yes.
I was thinking about areas when actually you have a discovering phase when you get coin the problem. You don't know the problem, and mainly your users don't know either what's the real problem. So I wonder how that fits in with superfans.
Well, can you give me a specific example?
Yes, everything that's linked to innovation, and an example that I'm using is hair dryer, for example. The people before that hair dryer exists didn't know that they need a hair dryer.
So, yeah, here's the reality. It's very rare that an innovation happens that society goes, oh my God, I didn't know that I needed this, and here it is. 99% of innovation is filling a need for people that are on the edges of people that in that curve I showed you are the innovators and early adopters. So here, what I've seen is that the people that say, oh, innovation isn't about going out and finding needs. It's about just making stuff up that's tech.
No, that was not
want it. No, so here's what I found. I found that you can go out and find people's needs, and you don't ask people what their needs are first. So when you say, well, people don't know what their needs are, if you're a good researcher, you can figure out what people's needs are, is the bottom line. So all these techniques I showed you today, like the low fidelity mock-ups, if you recruit the right people using the techniques I laid out, and you make low fidelity mock-ups of your end-to-end journey that you want to deliver, not of all screens in your onboarding, but like day 0 to day 30, right? If you make low fidelity mock-ups of that and you test that on your superfans, you will figure out everything you need to figure out. They don't even have to be able to articulate their needs. But it's not that you just go study their needs and you're done. It's that you use, one, the fact that there's people that have a need as market validation. That's thing number one, is that so many people, they don't validate their market. This is part of how you validate your market. You go find a pocket of early adopters who has a need, right? It's standard technology adoption cycle stuff. And so there's that. But then, okay, well, what do you want to deliver? Like, once you've identified the people that you know you want to test on, what are you going to deliver? That's where if you can't create low fidelity storyboards or mock-ups of your end-to-end experience, you don't understand your product. So it's a forcing function that gets you and your team to articulate from the customer's point of view the experience you want to deliver. And that's a hypothesis, okay? I'm talking about innovation. I'm talking about cutting edge innovation. That's a hypothesis. Now, you test that hypothesis with the right subjects. And the right subjects are the people that actually have a need. Let me give you a thought experiment. What would happen if you tested your hypothesis? Let's say you want to innovate, right? You go, well, people, they don't know what they need, blah, blah, blah. I'll just test it on anybody. And you make it, and let's say that you test this carefully, executed hypothesis on some really different groups of people. Let's say you test it on people that have this need, and let's say you test it on people that don't have the need, or like with Replica, people that have a mental health struggle or people that are really into cutting edge AI. Those are two different cohorts, right? Okay, let's say you test your product on both of them. What are you going to learn?
It will average out and multiply your results. You will not be able to understand what exactly you want to test. Because one side it will be low, one side it will be high. Because this guy will not need that, and the other guy will need it high.
That's right. And that's why knowing who you're targeting. So that's why I said, give me a specific example, because what you just said about innovation, I've seen over and over again. If people say, oh, well, people don't know what they want, they're not talking to the right people. That's been my experience.
Or if your example is like iPod to iPhone, or iPod actually the different thing that came in suddenly in the market. Nobody knew until Apple introduced it. Yeah. Is that kind of innovation?
No, my point was not that people don't know what they need, but they can't state it in a way. When you say super
They don't
fans,
have to.
Yeah, but that's what
I think
the point
that's
is.
the answer, is that using these research methods, they don't have to.
Yeah, of course. I was thinking from a design thinking point of view, actually.
What do you mean?
What is, if you do discovery, people will tell what their needs are, their problem, but they will. It's up to you then to see what is really the core need and how could you help them. And as the way that you stated the superfans, it's like they already know that there are the people that really, really, really can state very clearly the need.
They don't even have to be able to state it clearly. You can tell when you interview them they have it. Because of here's the key phrase for you to remember: solution-seeking behavior. People that have a need and are looking for a solution are extremely useful. Does that apply to every situation under the sun? No. Does it apply to most situations? Yes. So let's go to your question.
My question is related to how do you get to know the needs of you said we need to find the habits of the people and understand, and then stack your habits to them.
Right. So
You mentioned about user research.
yes. So there's we have a tool called the Superfan funnel, and it's got multiple stages and multiple templates. Let me tell you how it works. And it's
Okay.
like a little machine. And so you build yourself a Superfan funnel, and then you can deploy it whenever you need it, and in comes the right customers. But it's not that easy to build. So part of it is channels, outreach channels, deciding on what outreach channels you're going to use to find people. And there's all different kinds, everything from your own database or email list if you're studying existing customers, to Facebook groups where they gather, or Discord or Reddit, to friends and family, to Craigslist ads or other ads run. There's a lot of different outreach channels. But ideally, you want organic outreach channels, and you want to figure out where those people already gather. Sometimes people go to conferences like this to recruit superfans. And then you write a screener that's based on behavior, and we have a template for that. And we have videos on Game Thinking TV that walk you through it. And so you screen them with the screener, and then you screen them again with speed interviews, which are 5-minute interviews that follow up on the screener. And then you have the people that you want to test your ideas on. And then for the test, you ideally run a low-fidelity play test with storyboards of your end-to-end experience. But sometimes people will test a built product, a new feature set, if they already have something and they know they need to find the people to test. But that's pretty much how you do it. So the tricky parts are the channels, figuring out the channels, and then figuring out the right questions to ask. But again, that's why we have templates and instructions. With the screener, there's 3 multiple choice and 3 open-ended questions. And the open-ended questions include day-in-the-life questions. And so you said, how do you find out about their habits? Well, you first of all have multiple choice questions, so you screen them enough to see if they're relevant, because you don't want to learn the habits of everybody. You want to learn the habits of the relevant people. And then for the relevant people, you can look at their day-in-the-life questions, because you ask them the question that's going to get them to talk about that. And that pretty much tells you whether you want to continue to talk to them and learn more. And then in the 5-minute interview, you usually delve into that. And after that screening process, you will have a handful of exactly the right people, and you'll understand what their day looks like and where your product might fit into that. So that's how you do it,
Great one.
operationally.
Yeah, this is very great. But are we only targeting a limited audience with this very tiny scope?
Initially, and that's how you do it. And that's the whole point of think small and think big. Do you understand the concept of a proxy? So a proxy is like a rough representation of something that represents the real thing. And you are finding people that are a proxy for where the rest of your market's going to be in 18 to 24 months, pretty much. And that's one way to look at it. So when you say, oh, it's so tiny, yeah, and it's going to get bigger later, but you have to start small in order to grow big. And the smaller you can start, if you can find 5 of exactly the right people, that's great. But you don't stop there. It's just, that's how you get started. Why is that so useful? Because the data is a lot easier to analyze. If you have like a lot of people say, I like big data. I want thousands of data points. I don't believe it unless it's thousands of data points. Believe me, I work with plenty of people like that. Guess what? Sometimes that's relevant. That's what happened at Netflix. When I worked at Netflix, they had a crack data team. They had thousands, millions of data points. They had all this stuff, and they couldn't solve their problem. And we literally recruited 5 or 7 of exactly the right people and did this storyboard thing I was talking to you about, solve their problem.
All right, thank you.
So you don't stop there, but it gives you a small relevant data set that you can then start iterating with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Another question back there? And then this gentleman over there, and then anyone else with questions.
So I have a case study which I think most people here will be able to relate to.
Excellent.
So about a year back, we used to be we thought about building a product for doing retrospectives. So I think everybody understands what we're talking about. And we did our own retrospectives, like you do retrospectives in a typical Agile team. Okay, there are products like Retrium that do exactly that. So we went around looking into, in terms of what's the common source of frustration that people who are coming out of that process facing. And 3 things came out to us. One was that most retrospectives are not anonymous, right? So therefore, people are hesitant to give an honest opinion, number 1. Number 2, they're not well time managed. So there would be 1 hour, but typically by the time all the patting of the back gets done, 50 minutes are over. And so not anything real substantial in terms of root cause analysis and action items comes out of it. So we identified that as 3 key areas that we wanted to build as our differentiated capabilities. So if you were to ask me what's my super fan, I would say somebody who's been frustrated in this retrospective process when not getting actionable outcomes in terms of what would happen in the next 2 to 4 weeks, and who would fix that action item. So that would be my super fan. I don't know if that's still too broad, or you would like.
What do you think?
I think it's a little broad because it is obviously across an industry definition. It's not limited to just a software development team. It can be to any team.
So then, if you think it's too broad, the way to get started is, who are the first 20 people realistically that I could reach to use this? Is it something you're building? What stage of development is it at?
Oh, it's fairly late stage. We actually rolled out our MVP version already.
Okay. Who's using it?
So we right now have about 70, 80 different signups that we have. And it was rolled out on March 6th. And so that's the amount of traction that we have got so far.
Right. So here's the reality of software development. Sometimes you don't know who your superfans are early on, and you just launch it and figure out it on the fly. Right?
Right.
So that's what Replica did. And that's partly because I worked with them later in the process. But that's what they did. And so maybe you don't need to bother, but in general, the reason people do this is because you can't build for everybody. And when you get into adding features and you're hearing these people want this and these people want this and these people want this, it's a nightmare. And that is the practical reason to get super focused on who you care the most about. So do you have a hypothesis about who you care the most about? And if you don't, there's ways you can data mine your data to figure that out.
So I think we can do that, but the difficulties, so I look after engineering and product management. So the difficulty that we get is that from a sales and a business point of view, they are focusing on as big as the TAM is, right? So to convince them to say, okay, let's stick to this market and make this work, for them, the clock is ticking. The product is rolled out, my revenue targets are already there. You want to experiment with the cohort.
Is this a startup or a mature company?
No, it's a startup.
Is this your first product?
No, it's our third.
How successful were the first 2?
I would say the first one was very successful. The second was average.
Okay, and this is the third one.
Yes. So the point is that so there is that dynamic. Though I understand where you're coming from, and perhaps we need to do a better push back in terms of sticking to a core cohort and then working around with that. But the more important thing that I wanted to understand is, in this kind of a product, retrospectives, what would be a habit-forming thing? I can't think of what
How
is
often
really
do you do retrospectives? Every 2 weeks,
You do
right?
once every 2 weeks, right?
Right. That's the habit.
But that's not something that somebody is really
the other thing is, you and I can sit here and hypothesize about what the habit is, but you'll learn about it when you run
through a
test. I get surprised all the time. I have so many stories about, we thought it, analytically, we thought it was this habit. And then we run and turns out it was different.
Sure.
But you always find it out in a playtest. The obvious habit seems to be something around that every 2 weeks retrospective. And you could find out by doing, running what I told this gentleman, that whole thing. And just because you want to target a lot of people doesn't mean you shouldn't know who you are Whose
focusing.
problem are you solving the best, right? Like,
So I would say like the Scrum Master in this case, whose objective is to remove the impediments as much as he can for the team.
okay, so that's a good hypothesis. So then what you would want to do is you would want to recruit and talk to and interview a bunch of Scrum Masters that are the target, like maybe from the people already using your product, but that, fit that profile and understand what habits they already have around retrospectives, right?
Okay.
Like, that's the interesting question. We think we know, but what habits do they have? Is it just the retrospective? Is it 3 days before? Is it like prepping for a Monday meeting? Like, what are the habits?
So does the term habit, I would normally think, has a connotation that I get some real personal sense of accomplishment or joy when I do that?
Not necessarily.
That's not necessary. Okay.
That's interesting that you made that association. No, a habit is just something that happens repeatedly that you do.
So it's not a
over and
hobby,
over
it's
again.
still a habit.
No.
Okay.
No, there's lots of work habits.
Okay. Cool.
Like,
Thanks.
getting your coffee and opening up Slack and seeing what's happening with your team, right?
So you think habit is more of a, say, repetitive action, what we are doing on
A what?
repetitive action, what we do on a regular basis? Can we
Yeah, that's one very common definition. And the other thing about these words is use them how you want. Like, I don't like to get into arguments about semantics, partly because it's contextual, right? So I define a habit as an existing behavior that somebody does repeatedly in their life. Could be in their work life, could be in their home life, whatever. And it, again, doesn't have to be daily. Every summer, we go to the lake and spend a week with our extended family at a lake house. That's a habit. But it's yearly. Did you have another question? You had raised your hand.
So, when you're talking about initial exercise of doing to a small and then moving that specific experiment to a larger audience, that is small to big. So, do you think the actions what you're gonna do, for example, or the results what you're gonna, you are not expecting, say, to have any, say, illustrations where you can share it right now where say one was a linear result and one was a non-linear result, and what was the, say, the difference of delta between the two, or how did you identify in terms of patterns?
What do you mean by a linear result and a non? I mean, I know what the definitions of those words are mathematically, but what do you mean?
Let me give you an example. Okay, for example, let's say you are trying to enter a new product category for which you don't have a competitor. So probably I would say whatever experiment you are going to do with a small to a larger audience, you might not be able to, say, compare that with the competitor.
So in that case, that will be something like, say, one-to-one mapping. One-to-one mapping. Okay. So say you are testing the results of 100, say 10 people you have tested this. For 100 people, you are doing it. So it's just a into 10, whatever the results are. But let's say you are entering a already established product category. Let's
Give me
say
a specific example. Let's get concrete.
Let's say, for example,
Not quite that loud.
Yeah. So let's say, for example, say established product category could be, let's say, launching bubble gum. Say you're competing against Wrigley's for that matter. Okay. Or let's say if it is something like, say, entering a new product category, could be something like launching an electric vehicle. So for which you have only one or two competitors, say Tesla. So for Tesla, I would say it would be a non-linear, considering you need to look at the competitor data and how do you say map it and look at the data patterns in that particular perspectives. But when it comes to, let's say Wrigley's, probably you would be looking at a linear because it's an established one, or it could be vice versa too, depending on whatever your illustrations are.
I don't really understand your question. I don't quite know what you're asking. I mean, if you're doing packaged goods like Wrigley's or gum, that's a whole category, okay? And so in packaged goods, usually that's not about innovation unless you're doing something super innovative, and mostly it's about marketing, right? And you just need a differentiating angle in packaged goods. Tesla's a completely different situation, which is kind of building out a new category. So I don't understand what you're asking.
So my question was something like, let's say from a results point of view, let's say
From a what point of view?
Results point of view, from results.
Okay.
From small to many, from mapping when you do comparatively. So do you follow linear or
let me cut to the chase. Tesla started with super high-end luxury cars for rich people, right?
Okay. Yes, correct.
And then they've been coming down more. So that was their small to large market evolution. So how does that map to your question?
I'm talking from mapping point of view, from the number of users initially.
Why are you talking about the number of users? I don't.
So typically, let's say when you want to really test a product in the market, probably you don't really say, okay, 1,000 people are going to buy my product. You should always say, let's say let 100 people test it, give me the feedback. I will improve it on a continuous basis. Then I will probably, release a better product.
I'm talking about qualitative testing, not numbers and quantitative testing. I'm talking about a phase of testing that happens before quantitative testing. That's what we've been talking about today. So if you're building anything, you're going to get to the quantitative part where you have thousands of people, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not the topic that we're talking about today. So that's, I think, where the disconnect is.
Okay.
That's a valid thing to do. It's a perfectly fine thing to do. We did it on this, we did it on The Sims, we did it on Rock Band, you did it on Netflix. But what I'm talking about today are techniques that help you know what to build by doing qualitative testing with exactly the right number of people. And there is nothing that's going to replace that. And that's why I told you the story about Netflix. No amount of quantitative testing like what you're talking about can solve certain problems. It just can't.
Okay.
I think that's the takeaway.
But
this gives you a different kind of data that helps you solve tricky retention problems, and marketing and focusing and targeting problems about who you're targeting, that all that quantitative testing won't give you. It won't solve those problems.
But do you have any illustrations from your, let's say, from your consulting or your mentoring where whatever my use case has come across in your career or any of your consulting?
I still don't understand the question. It's like you're saying,
let's say from a quantitative, I'll keep it simple. So instead of qualitative, from a quantitative approach, have you faced any of this kind of thing where you had used a non-linear approach to get the desired results, or from a comparative point of view, from moving to testing it on a smaller number of people to multiplying it to 100 people to 1,000 people to see how does it fare, the product?
No.
Okay. Maybe I come from a different background. So
no, I mean, I think that there's people in the companies I've worked with that did that, but that wasn't my job. I had a different job on the team.
Okay, fine.
I'm working on teams with dozens or hundreds of people, so a lot of times. Okay, any other questions?
No.
Yes,
thank
one
you.
more here. This lady.
Suppose if it's a complex product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ours is a healthcare product, which is complex. So in such a product, how do we identify there can be multiple habit loops?
Yeah, there can, and there's often multiple habit loops in real products and in real games. You do it using exactly the techniques I just told you about, pretty much, is how you... Well, so, like, is it an existing product or is it in development? And what problem are you trying to solve? Is it having retention issues or?
No, we don't have any issues as such, but then not even retention issues. I was thinking, in terms of stacking on an existing habit. So like, there are like multiple habits, then how can I stack on something? I was thinking from that perspective. Of course, to increase retention and to keep up the churn.
So see how people are already using it, pretty much.
And then add something on top of.
Well, and understand what they're already doing. Not necessarily add something, but I mean, you want everything that you would add, you want to make what they're trying to do better, right? That's your goal. That's your North Star. So you don't just want to add stuff really willy-nilly. You want to, I mean, sometimes making it better is taking stuff away, right? But it all starts by understanding how they're already using it. So there's lots of ways to do that. You can, you know, run a test and get someone to show you how they're using it. You know, there's, you know, other kinds of things. But if you already have customers that are using it, you're in a good position for recruiting if you want to know how to support those customers better. But it starts by just really understanding how they're already using your product, but what else they're doing like around your product. So not just, this is the important takeaway for you. It's not just how are they using your product. It's what's the rest of their day like. Like there might be something that happens before they pick up your product or after or later that's really relevant. And you'll know that if you really understand, you know, their day in the life kind of around your product. So that's the thing that gives you which habits to focus on.
Okay.
Is just get a snapshot of current use patterns. Sure. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Is that what kind of what you were thinking?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Apart from what we're doing, is there anything else we can support them in some ways? What? But I think I got my answer.
Well, is your job to just keep developing the product?
I'm basically a product manager over there. So yes, identifying, taking feedbacks, and see if we can improve somewhere.
Do you know who your users are? Are they broad or narrow?
They're broad.
Which makes it harder to take action on feedback.
Yes. But we've grouped them based on the sizes of the people who use it. But then again, it becomes harder because not one the smaller group wants, the bigger group doesn't want the same, right? So,
right. Yeah, and there's various things you can do there with cohort analysis, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you're interested in learning more, we cover all this stuff in our training programs and go really deep and help people execute all these things. So if any of you are interested in that,
yes.
feel free.
So the YouTube channel, or there's anything else as well?
Well, we have training programs.
Oh, you do?
Go to gamethinking.io
Oh, yes, you just.
and you'll see everything you need,
All right. Sure.
including the YouTube channel. Did you have another question?
No, I'm good.
No, you're good?
The one I know.
Great. All right, well, thank you so much. Is it time now? We cleared the room. Yes, now it's time to leave. All right.